Today we're going to be looking at the Ottoman Empire and the Safavid Empire. These are two of the major gunpowder empires that we're going to be looking at in AP World History. They dominated the Middle East for a number of centuries, becoming really the crossroads between Europeans and Asians. All right, they become the middlemen of trade between Europe and Asia, and they really play an important role in the cultural and religious developments of the region. Now, the term Gunpowder Empire is a term used by historians to denote specifically the Safavid Empire, the Ottoman Empire, and the Mughal Empire. And those three empires are unique in the fact that they utilized the new technology of gunpowder in cannons and muskets and what have you to solidify power and to expand in a region. Now, these are not maritime-based empires. The gunpowder empires were land-based empires. They dominated a specific region and again utilized the new technology to subjugate neighbors and what have you, and they did it very successfully. So we look at that very closely when we talk about the gunpowder empires. But the gunpowder empires are basically going to be a trend, a fad, that don't survive past the point of European empires really emerging as maritime powers. Now, the first empire we're going to be looking at is the Ottoman Empire. The Ottoman Empire spans about 6 centuries of dominance in the Middle East, from about 1299 to 1923. If you look over at the map there on the left, we get the picture of the Ottoman Empire at the height of its expansion. And basically it dominated a region from the Persian Gulf far in the east, in modern-day Iraq and Iran, all the way to the gates of Vienna in modern-day Austria. From the coast of North Africa, if you can see there, Egypt, Morocco, and most of the North African coast, all the way up to modern-day Ukraine. Right there on the northern part of the Black Sea. So it covered a tremendous amount of territory that we're looking at first. And basically, by the time you get to the Ottoman Empire in the 1600s, it becomes a major contender against other European powers for domination in the region. The Ottomans, for a couple of centuries there, when they're at their height, are competing with the Russians and the Spanish Habsburgs for territory in the Balkans. So they really, contend with a lot of the major European powers for dominance in the region. Now, the Ottoman Empire reaches its height in the 1500s, in the 16th century. And after that point, from 1600 onward, it begins a slow decline. And it gets the nickname the sick man of Europe, because all through a few centuries there, up until 1923, it's on this slow period of decline that we're going to be looking at. Now, to understand where the Ottomans originated, we got to go back to the Middle Ages. If we go back to the 10th, 11th centuries in Anatolia, modern-day Turkey, the dominating force in the region is the Byzantine Empire, based in Constantinople. Now, as you guys know from previous units, the Byzantine Empire was the Eastern Roman Empire. It was still holding on, based out of Constantinople. Now, the group of people that will become the Ottomans were a Turkic tribe, a nomadic tribe that lived in Anatolia. There were a number of Turkic tribes that lived in the area. Now, Turkic is a term applied to an ethnic group in Central Asia. And so the Ottomans were just one Turkic people in the area that we're looking at. The real turning point we get for the Turks, or the Ottomans, I should say, is in the 11th century at the Battle of Manzikert in 1071. We get the Turks defeating the Byzantines on the battlefield for the first time. And it's after 1071 that you see the decline of the Byzantine Empire and the rise of the Turkic tribespeople in Anatolia. And the Ottomans, from Manzikert in 1071 to about the year 1300, were in a period of transition. They were going from nomadic people to becoming an actual state. And what you're going to have in Anatolia, modern-day Turkey, is just a number of Turkic states in the area. There's like a patchwork of Turkic microstates. And one of those microstates in modern-day Turkey was run by a guy by the name of Osman, who is going to be basically the founder of the Ottoman Empire. Now, these Turkish microstates were known as Ghazi Emirates, and they made up, these little tiny states in Anatolia. And Osman the Great, or Osman the First, controlled one of these small emirates, and through political cunning and skill, he's going to expand his holdings, his territory, and he's going to basically, play his neighbors against each other and dominate his neighbors that way. So he divides his neighbors, he dominates his neighbors, and he expands his empire, basically, becoming the most prominent and powerful emirate that we're looking at in Anatolia at this time. Now, once Osman had pretty much dominated the other Turkic peoples in the region and subjugated them, his next, group of people that he was going to butt heads with was Byzantium, all right, the Byzantine Empire. And the biggest blow that the Byzantine are going to suffer at the hands of Osman was the fall of the city of Bursa in 1324. This was a major Byzantine stronghold that was a huge victory for Osman. He makes Bursa his new capital, and he continues to expand all around Anatolia. Successors of Osman are also going to push into Europe, the Balkan Peninsula. And you're going to have the Battle of Kosovo in 1389, which marks the start of Ottoman expansion into Europe. And so after the Battle of Kosovo in 1389, what you're going to have is Byzantine holdings pretty much shrinking to only include Constantinople and the areas around Constantinople. So the Byzantines, by the time you get to the year 1400, are completely hemmed in and surrounded by the Ottoman Turks, basically. So the last holdout, the last vestige of the old Roman Empire is just a small, the city of Constantinople itself. And so the Ottomans now have this basically enemy right in the center of their new empire. So it becomes a goal of many Ottoman leaders in the early 1400s to be the one that actually takes Constantinople, that gets rid of their enemy, basically. Now, the Sultan that is most known for taking this challenge seriously and eventually doing it is Mehmet II. Like all sultans before him, it was his dream, it was his goal to take out the city of Constantinople. So by 1453, he decides and realizes that the time has come. Mehmet organizes an estimated 100,000 troops to lay siege to the city of Constantinople. So Mehmet and his troops surround the city, this walled fortress that had been held by the Byzantines for hundreds of years, and begin to lay siege to the town. Now, there's a couple ways you can lay siege to a place. If fortifications were too strong, a common practice was to basically just surround the town or the city and starve it out. Not let supplies get through and eventually starve it out. Another option was you can find weaknesses in the walls and exploit those weaknesses, and then do the best you can to send in ground troops to breach these walls. Another option, since it was the year 1453, was a new technology, and that was cannons, firearms, utilizing large cannons to take out the walls of the city. So Mehmet's going to kind of use a combination of all three of these, surrounding the city for a very long time, trying to snuff out supplies. Then he's going to utilize his ground troops to try to find holes in the wall and where he can exploit the weaknesses in the walls. And he's also going to use a massive cannon, or a couple of them, to pummel the walls of Constantinople. So eventually he's going to, fall on this new technology, the cannons, to keep pounding and hitting the same parts of the same wall over and over again until eventually they fall. After some time with these strategies being utilized, the city of Constantinople and the last Byzantine emperor surrenders to Mehmet II. Mehmet enters, if you can see in the painting here, into Constantinople under great parade and cheerful banner, taking over the city. The Cathedral of Hagia Sophia, which had stood since Justinian's time, was a grand church within the city, was converted into a mosque, and Constantinople became the capital of his new Islamic empire. Suleiman does not stop there. Mehmet II does not stop there. He continues expansion into the Balkans, expanding into modern-day Hungary, and really he builds the foundation for the Ottoman Empire to be this force to be reckoned with. It's really with Mehmet II that we see the Ottomans going from this second-rate power to one that's going to start to contend with European powers in the region for dominance and control. Successors of Mehmet II continued this trend of expansion that we see in Ottoman history after this point. Most notably, Sultan Selim I. He's going to be the first of these Ottoman sultans to lead a war, if you would, against fellow Ottomans, the Safavid Empire to the east. Now, if we go back to what was originally preached to Muslims with the founding of Muhammad, that was Muslims are not going to or should not fight other Muslims, that you shouldn't fight members of the Ummah. So Selim needs to find an excuse to get around this, and he does by basically saying that the Shiite-led Safavid Empire were heretics and had pretty much lost their way. So he justifies military action that way. And by 1514, you're going to have what's called the Battle of Caldera, and this is a stunning victory by the Ottomans against the Safavid Empire. And basically it solidifies this control of the Ottoman Empire into eastern Anatolia. And it's the beginning, basically, of the decline of the Persian Safavid Empire, which is eventually going to be on the slow decline as the Ottomans are on this rise that we're going to be looking at. Now, Selim is going to win this stunning victory against his fellow Islamic neighbors, mostly because he utilizes, again, the gunpowder technology of the age, flint-locked muskets, and small cannon on the battlefield. His army was also made up of a group of people known as the Janissary. Now, the Janissary Corps had been in existence for some time, and basically what that was is that the Ottomans would go into Christian territories. They would find small kids in Christian towns, find the strongest or the brightest ones, and kidnap them, take them from their families, take them to, Istanbul, and train them in military techniques and how to fight and what have you. And basically, after years of this kind of training, you have the Janissary, these kind of converted Christian young males who were now soldiers in the Sultan's army, who usually had unquestioning loyalty to the Sultan. So it's these combination of the gunpowder, the gunpowder technology, and the Janissary Corps is really going to prove successful on the battlefield, and is really going to help the Ottomans during their great time of expansion that we're looking at here. Now, most historians are going to agree that the Ottoman Empire reaches its height under Suleiman the Magnificent, pictured right there to the left. And basically what we're going to have here is Ottoman territory reaching its zenith, really, all the way from Vienna to modern-day Basra in Iraq, and very large chunks of territory taken out of the Safavid Persian Empire. So Suleiman really rules over this time of Ottoman domination in the region. Also, the Ottomans are going to maneuver their way into European politics. Suleiman approves an allegiance with France, which was very important and significant for the Ottomans. And this Franco-Ottoman alliance was basically put together because they were trying to counter Habsburg power. Now, the Habsburgs controlled territories in the Holy Roman Empire, Spain, so they were really seen as a huge threat in Europe, and that it needed to be countered. So the Ottomans and the French were there to counter this Habsburg expansion and to kind of maintain this power balance in Europe. So really, for the first time, we see the Ottomans as a major European player. Another reason they become so important in European politics is the fact that, this is the year 1500. A lot of trade that was being done between Europeans and South Asians and East Asians was done through the Ottomans, through the traditional trade routes that had existed for centuries. So the Ottomans, because of their geographic location, right in the middle of it all, are really going to benefit from this European want for global trade. And in the year 1500, the New World was just being discovered by Europeans, and alternative trade routes were also being discovered, or just being discovered. So the common way to go, if you wanted to trade with the East or East Asia, was to go through the Ottomans. By 1680, the Ottomans were again laying siege to the city of Vienna. And by 1680, again, was an insanely large empire, from Vienna to Persia. And under this huge territorial expanse, they encompassed a lot of different ethnic groups, religious groups, language groups. And once you become an empire of that size and scale, encompassing all that diversity, it becomes very difficult to keep it all under control. To not have rebellions and to not have certain people within your empire wanting some type of autonomy or independence. So what we see with the Ottoman Empire after 1650 to about 1750 is this continual stagnation and decline eventually that we're going to be looking at. We're going to have a number of poor sultans, poor leadership, incompetent sultans, mutinous janissaries. You're going to have a number of janissary officers begin to mutiny against the sultan. So we just have this breakdown in leadership within the Ottoman Empire at this time, and there's not much keeping it together. The Ottoman Empire during this time also did not innovate as much as Europeans were doing. Between 1650 and 1750, we see almost continuous warfare in Europe that was oftentimes forcing European states to come out with bigger and better military technologies, larger armies. And we just don't see that as much with the Ottomans. The competition that they're facing in the Middle East and in areas like that is not very great. So we see this total stagnation of their military technology. Also, we see a stagnation of the economic system within the Ottoman Empire. In centuries prior to this, as I already stated, the Ottomans were the trade middlemen between Europeans and East Asia. Now what we have by 1650 is well-established maritime routes that Europeans were using to bypass the Ottomans. They were going around Africa to reach Asia. They were going all the way west around the Americas to reach the Far East. So the Ottomans are basically being bypassed at this time. They're being looked over. And because of this, they essentially become a time capsule that doesn't change. And that's eventually going to lead to their inevitable downfall by 1923. Rising European states, most notably the Russians, are starting to take advantage of the weakening Ottoman Empire. The Ottomans at this time get the nickname the sick man of Europe. And so what you're going to have is this slow decline being created in areas that were once controlled by the Ottomans, and European powers going in to fill the void. So basically you're having a power vacuum created in different areas around the Balkans and the Black Sea that the Russians are just going in there and just marching in, mopping up, making it part of their new empire. So we see this oftentimes with, empires. All glory is fleeting, nothing lasts forever, and we begin to see that happen here with the Ottoman Empire. But it's going to be a slow decline until you get to the First World War, and the Ottomans are on the losing side in that war, and eventually that's going to lead to the last Sultan being abdicating, basically in 1923, and you're going to have the eventual creation of the modern day state of Turkey. So you'll get the modern day state of Turkey emerging out of these ashes that were the Ottoman Empire. But the legacy of the Ottoman Empire, lives on in the area, culturally, linguistically, and the history lives on. Now, the other Ottoman Gunpowder Empire that we're going to be looking at is the Safavid Empire, which existed in modern day Iran. So they're a Persian empire. They're Persian culturally and linguistically. The Safavid kings claimed to be Sayyid, which basically means they believe they were descendants of the Prophet Muhammad. So we get that continual lineage basically being tied to the Safavid kings. Also, the Safavid Empire was a Shiite Muslim empire, which we looked at earlier with the Ottomans. They were Sunni. So it's no surprise that the two empires, come to blows basically over territorial disputes in in Western Anatolia and other areas like that. And so if you look at the map that we have here, the Safavid Empire at its height basically covers, Eastern Anatolia, modern day Turkey, all the way to Pakistan. So it's a tremendous, amount of land holdings in the area, but butting up right against the Ottoman lands. Now, the guy to the left there, Shah Ismail I, is the founder of the Safavid dynasty, and he creates it in 1501 after unifying different factions within what we know as Persia today. By 1511, we have a rapid expansion taking place. Lots of military expansion happening under the Shahs within this empire. And we got different territories being conquered: Azerbaijan, Baghdad in modern-day Iraq, and the Van province in eastern Anatolia. So it's going to be this expansion into the west that is really going to put the Safavid Empire up against the Ottoman Empire. And you're going to have a classic showdown between the two. And as I already stated earlier, by the 1500s, the mid-1500s, the Ottomans are really going to, assert their dominance on the battlefield. And this doesn't necessarily get rid of the Safavid Empire, but it makes it not expand any farther into Ottoman lands. So the line has been drawn, and there was no more westward expansion happening by the Safavids. But if you look at the picture on the right as well, we got a musketeer. This was, like the Ottoman Empire, a gunpowder empire, a land-based gunpowder empire. And just like the Ottoman Empire, the Safavid Empire is going to also benefit from basically being the crossroads of East and West, having a lot of hand in global trade at the time. Now, the way Safavid society was set up, there was a very strict hierarchy. You're going to have the Shah at the top of this pyramid, and a strict hierarchy and allegiance to the Shah. Now, what makes the bureaucracy really interesting in this empire is that, with the exception of the Shah himself, who was believed to be a descendant of Muhammad, the rest of the bureaucratic system or government officials within this empire, it was based off merit. If you wanted to achieve a higher position within the society, it was based off merit. It wasn't based off birth or any kind of lineage. So it's kind of interesting and unique in that sense. But basically, when we have empires that are set up this way, they tend to be more successful because the people who are getting these government positions and these bureaucratic positions are capable and able and deserve it. Unlike somebody who maybe got it through birth or succession, and is terrible. We see that a lot throughout history. But this society that we have here is also a religious society. It's not a secular society. So Islam really permeates all aspect of Safavid society. And this is Shiite Islam. So it's much more conservative to some degree than Sunni Islam, but we're going to see it really be in all aspects of society. One part that we got to look at is law. The Safavid Empire is going to utilize Sharia law, Islamic law, and incorporate it in their everyday lives. So it's going to be a strict adherence to Islam, strict adherence to Islamic law that the Safavids are going to follow, and it's going to be a strict, non-secular society. Now, the trend that we see by the time you get to the year 1700 is the decline of the Gunpowder Empires. The Gunpowder Empires were, powerful, from 1400 to 1700. They were the force to be reckoned with. But the trend we see after 1750 is the rise of the maritime empires and the decline of the land-based empires, with few exceptions. So European powers like England, France, the Dutch are all going to control these very large overseas empires that require a nation now to have a large navy and trade contacts and organized, armies and navies that they can transport all over the globe. And so these maritime powers can transport their navy and, if need be, their ground troops by using and utilizing their navy. So what you're going to have is these maritime empires basically hemming in the Gunpowder empires. And the maritime powers as well were under a lot of competition, had to deal with a lot of competition. So new sailing technologies, new military technologies were being utilized and put into practice from 1600 to about 1750. And you just don't see that really happening with the Ottomans. Their society stagnates and doesn't innovate, and basically what you're going to have is these once grand gunpowder land-based empires, by the time you get to the year 1750, are going to fall victim and prey to Western powers, maritime Western powers that were, far more advanced and modern than they were. So we're going to see this slow decline of these land-based empires. The last one to hang around is the Ottoman Empire, which again lasts until 1923. But the Mughals, for example, are going to fall victim to the growing British Empire, and the Safavids to the Ottomans, and then eventually Europeans. So it's just like with other things that we look at with history, it's a trend. Trends come and go, and by 1750, the Gunpowder empires were outdated, not important. As we look at the rise of maritime European powers.